Welcome to Thursday Live, everybody. I want to express my appreciation for each and every one of you who are gathering together for our weekly connection. And if you're a first timer or a guest, welcome to Thursday Live, our time to just break away for a few moments together to focus on the one thing that can take away the gravity and darkness and despair of this world and fill us with a little bit of light and a little bit of joy and a little bit of hope. And so I'm so grateful that you're here. And for those of you who are regular, you'll know what's going on. For those of you who might be first timers, this is my sidekick. He is at my feet. He is my Thursday Live security blanket. I don't know why he just doesn't know how to position himself in the camera. So that's Lincoln and his very own live Lincoln cam. And for those of you who hear the junk in my voice, I have been sick for the last several days. And to be totally candid, I tested positive for COVID again. I had Delta almost a year ago in August, and it was a far bigger hit. I got into it fast, got out of it, but the symptoms were really more dramatic. This is Omicron, and it's been more like a pretty uncomfortable cold, chest cold, that kind of thing, but rather light symptoms compared to the last. And thankfully, it seems like I'm rolling through it and should be back to normal in a day or two. But I appreciate your prayers, appreciate your encouragement. For those of you who are newer to Thursday Live and those of you who are on Thursday Live a lot, this is just a very personal time that I, as the pastor of Northridge Church, get to connect with people, many who are a part of Northridge Church, but many who aren't. I have the privilege of pastoring what's known as a larger church, and so very often pastors don't have a lot of personal connections with people. And this is my way of trying to be a little bit more personal, a little bit more raw, a little bit more real, a little bit more close up, even though it's through technology, about life. So, there's no reason to pretend or have pretense. I like to share what's going on in my life. And so that's the bad news. Got COVID. But the good news is it seems to be passing through pretty nicely. And I know that's grace, and not everybody has that experience. But seriously, having had Delta and now having Omicron, I can tell you that at least in my experience, this is anecdotal to me, but it seems to be the data with most, it's a less hostile and aggressive form of COVID, the virus. So anyway, that's not why we're gathered right now. Here's the truth. I feel led by God to be focused a lot more on my shepherd role in this particular Thursday Live connection point. This week, with what happened in Uvalde, Texas, and at Robb Elementary School, and the unthinkable, unimaginable, incomprehensible, and heartbreaking event that has taken place, tragedy that has taken place, man-made craziness that has taken place, and then all of the aftermath of it. And just I think it's just really important that as a pastor, as a shepherd, I seek to bring some shepherding perspective to it. And I have to tell you right up front, I am a pastor. God has called me to shepherd one of his local communities. I've been doing it for a long time, but things that are really important to remember. He's the shepherd, the good shepherd, the great shepherd, and I can only shepherd in his stead to the degree that I'm connected to him, that I understand him and his truth and his word, and that I'm being led by his spirit and those kind of things. And even that will always be an imperfect reflection of the shepherd. So as I seek to offer some shepherding thoughts, I want to remind you that I am at best a bad reflection of the true shepherd. And so I want to encourage you all to look to him and go to him and turn to him. And that's the most important thing to do. And as well, I don't want to pretend as I try and offer some shepherding thoughts that all my thoughts are super clear, super well-rounded, that I have all the answers, because I don't. I still have to fall on my knees towards him as well when I'm dealing with these things. But the one thing that I refuse to have shaken as the whole world shakes is my faith in him. And I know many people do. Events like this just make them, how can I trust in, believe in, find hope in a God that allows this to happen, and all those different things. But I'm going to tell you that's just, from my perspective, just not the way to respond. I understand it from a human perspective, but it lacks understanding of God and God's largesse and all the other things. And so I just thought I would share some shepherding thoughts about how to deal with tragedies and the world's darkness and horrific world events like this. How do we, frail and finite beings who don't have the ability to even process this kind of emotional complexity and mental complexity and uncontrollable complexity and pain and grief complexity and all of that, how should we approach it? And remember, I'm not perfect at it myself. And all I'm doing is trying to grasp from the Good Shepherd and from his truth things that I can share with you, and things from my experience down the way. And I hope it helps you. But just know that I don't claim to have a perfect handle on this either. And so how do we? I'm just going to pop off some things. They're not really in any linear fashion. There are thoughts that all can go together. The first one is purposeful, and it will also be the last one. And I'm going to say it, and there's a lot of condemnation for this in our world. There's a lot of people who use it to beat people on the head for not doing more in this world and all that. But I am telling you, those are people who don't understand God, who don't believe in God, who don't understand our finiteness and his infiniteness, our inability to control anything, and his unbelievable vast ability, our inability to know all things, his ability to know all things, to understand all things, to see beginning from end, and all of those things. And the first thing we can do, if we want to be comforted and comfort, to be as helpful as we can be, is pray. We're not in control. We can't change what happened. But God is real and can give grace. He can give hope, comfort and hope in the midst of the tragedy, and he can bring wisdom, and he can, bring in occurrence events that brings grace into a circumstance that one human being with free will chose to bring evil and darkness into this world. And so we should pray. Another thing we should do, remember, how do we respond? How can we deal with? How can we process? If you feel a need to help in a real or tangible way outside of praying, and I get that, then seek wisdom and seek ways to do it appropriately. A lot of times, and I'm one of these, it's like I'm an activist. I like to jump, but I've learned over years and years and years, and there need to be first responders, and who knows, maybe God's calling some of you to be first responders in our communities and all of that. But I've learned that jumping sometimes isn't the best way to help tangibly. You can get in the way. You can throw money at something, and maybe that's not the solution. You can do all kinds of different things. So, God says if you lack wisdom, ask him for wisdom. So seek wisdom. Seek wisdom. And seek advice on ways you can do it appropriately. Look for partners that can actually go in, and if you want to support financially, you can waste a lot of money doing that if you go through the wrong channels. And just so you know, that's what we do at Northridge. What I do, I try to seek wisdom, find ways that are appropriate, and then take steps that can be tangible and understand my limitations. And another thing, be careful of false guilt in doing something tangible and real. No one can give tangible help for every tragedy. You can't do it. And I don't know if you know this, there have been 27 school shootings. There have been, there are unbelievable amounts of murders happening in cities all around the world. There's tragedy happening everywhere all the time, and it doesn't diminish this tragedy and the heartbreak of this tragedy, but you can't be guilty for not being able to do something tangible for every tragedy. That's a tool of Satan to defeat you instead of to allow you to shine light in your sphere of the world. Our mission is to wake the world up to Jesus. And one of the things I say is, by world, I mean our sphere of influence. And we have to be careful about thinking that we can control, we can change, we can make right wrongs outside of our sphere of influence, because we can't. And so don't get false guilt. But if you do feel led to do something tangible, be wise about it, be appropriate, look for effective partnerships and that kind of thing. But remember, in every circumstance, we can pray. Here's another piece of shepherding advice, and I hope this is helping you. Don't obsess. Don't obsess. And I know people that they can't shut the news off and they can't turn the news feeds off, and they're trying to get to know everything about every one of these precious little kids whose life were snuffed out in inappropriate, tragic, horrific ways. They want to know everything about the teachers, about this guy and all, and they obsess. And I'm telling you, there's no positive outcome from obsessing on it. There's a difference between being appropriately informed and obsessing. And I'm saying this now as in my best attempt to be a shepherd. God didn't create us to be able to fully internalize every tragedy in the world. He didn't create us that way. He gave us the emotions and the pains to react to the things in our sphere of influence and all of those things, and to then have empathy for those beyond our influence, but not to own them and be fully internalizing them as if they were happening to us. We cannot obsess on this as if this was the tragedy that was allowed to come into our world, like each of these kids were our personal kids. We have to empathize with these people and care. And I'm not trying to be harsh at all, but we cannot personalize every tragedy on the planet or we will die. The truth is, only God can keep functioning while knowing all pain. He wants you to care, but not to be overwhelmed. Because remember, in tragedy, when others are going through tragedy, someone has to be able to keep their head. Someone has to be able to help. Someone has to be able to support. Someone has to be able to encourage. Someone has to be able to pray for those who are in the tragedy. And if we're internalizing every tragedy, then we won't be ready for our own. And I think that's really a part. This is a shepherd speaking again. I think that's a part of the problem with our world. We're all so in possession of all the tragedies and so personalizing and internalizing it with social media and the 24/7 bombardment that when even little things happen to us, we explode and we're filled with rage and bitterness, and we can't handle it. So don't obsess. Remember that humanity, another thing that you should do in the wake of tragedies like this one, remember that humanity's broken. Humanity's broken, but God still loves and works, and so should we. We can't give up on God, and we can't give up on people. We just can't. Let's seek to make the world a little less broken and a little less dark. And by the way, there are so many people, and it's the number one question asked by most people. I've tried to answer it thousands of times in my ministry, but, why does God allow something to happen like this? First of all, I can't give you the full answer of that because I'm not God. His thoughts are beyond mine. His capacities are beyond mine. His knowledge is beyond mine. I can't do it, but I can tell you clearly what he has said. He's given the gift of free choice to humanity. We're not robots, and it's a great gift. But it's also the thing that produces tragedies like this, because people use the gift in the wrong way. If everybody has the gift of free choice, that means people have the choice to do things that hurt other people. And remember, God knows that our human experience is only a temporary plane of experience. Eternity's forever. And so he's told us that yes, it's tragic, horrific, it's wrong, it's evil, it's dark. But beyond this moment and beyond this life, there really is eternity. And so the gift of free choice can be given without him being some evil and dark and obnoxious, being. And so, I'm not going to go all the way into that again, but the key is when we experience things like this, we have to remember, well, how did this happen? Humanity's broken. And I'm so tired of the world that's clamoring for all the solutions, not to look at the one real issue. Humanity's broken and needs to be redeemed, which is why Jesus came and what he accomplished by dying on the cross, living the perfect life, using free choice in the perfect way to live for God, and then dying on the cross to pay for all of our broken choices, and then raising again to give us newness of life. Humanity's broken, and redemption's what the world needs. What we exist for as believers, as Christians, as Northridge Church, is to wake the world up to Jesus, because it's the only thing that can help fix the brokenness of humanity. So we need to keep working to make this world a little less broken and a little less dark by waking the world up to Jesus. Another thing, how to handle tragedies like this, don't settle for the easy answers. I'm so tired of these people acting like they're the smartest people on the planet, whether they're in politics or media or education, and giving us easy answers as if they're the most intelligent people in the world. Secular people think that their answers are so intelligent, but their answers are two-dimensional because they're not seeing into the dimension of the reality of the heavenlies where God exists. Don't settle for the easy answers of who's to blame and what's to blame and how it's so easy to fix it. And if you're not willing to do what they say is right to fix it, then you're the problem and all these other things. And then they attack prayer and all that. Let me just tell you, those kind of easy answers on either side of the spectrum are political, not real. They're grandstanding, they're not real solutions. We should seek answers, but they aren't going to come from the simpletons that live and die by their political divides. Solutions have to deal with the complexity of human brokenness mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and they have to contend, and this is really why the secularists are so foolish and simple and missing the point. That's why they give themselves over to their political divides and philosophical divides, because they don't see the complexity of the world. When you see an issue like this, don't settle for easy answers, and don't settle for any answer that doesn't force us to contend with the reality of evil. God said, if you're going to follow Jesus, then you got to believe what he said. And we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and wicked rulers of darkness in the heavenlies. And we need God to move us through this. And any other explanation misses the mark. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't some political things. It doesn't mean there aren't some philosophical things. It doesn't mean there aren't some educational things. It doesn't mean there's not mental health. It doesn't mean there's not emotional things. All of these things are real, but the simpletons don't act like it. They, like one law will fix it. One thing will solve it. No, it won't. Never has, never will. They're totally missing the mark. Another way to process an event like this, trying to speak as a shepherd. I think I got a little bit more like a preacher there just for a minute, but boy, it makes me mad. Don't allow events like this to deepen the hate divide in your life, because that's the natural reaction, to get filled with hate towards people who do this kind of thing, or the people who haven't passed certain laws or certain things, or the people who are for these things and not for that, or oh my gosh. Don't allow events like this to deepen the hate divide in your life. We can't keep buying into the idea that hating those we disagree with solves anything. To hate those we disagree with pretends that our simple solution fixes the problem. It doesn't. And so don't allow this to deepen the hate divide in your life. I've been a pastor a very, very long time, and I watched the hate divide increase even in spiritual communities. Thankfully, Northridge has been a pretty positive environment to a great extent, but I've watched churches divide and explode and split and move and go to war. The hate divide going over things that aren't even real solutions, over simpletons' quests. It's craziness. As a shepherd, I'm just saying, don't do it. Finally, two things. One, when you experience events like this, grieve, but don't lose hope. Don't obsess on it. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't try and internalize the whole pain of it. Don't be guilty that you're not more grieved about it. Grieve, but don't lose hope. And I have to tell you, as a shepherd, when God started allowing me to pastor a church that got bigger and bigger and bigger, I started being overwhelmed with the burdens of the people underneath my ministry, within my ministry that I was called to be the pastor for. I found out about 10 people whose lives were falling apart in ways, and then I multiplied that by thousands, and I was like, I couldn't handle it. And that's when God started teaching me, I didn't call you to own and personally internalize all the pain of all these problems. That's my job. I called you to care, to shepherd, to try and marshal support and resources, and mostly to help point them to me, Jesus was saying. Not to experience all their pain. That's my job, God said. But to point them to the one that cried tears that were being saved in heaven, you know. But when you experience this, grieve. Yes, grieve, of course. Grieve for humanity. Grieve for those families. Grieve for those children. Grieve for our world. But don't lose hope. Listen to 1 Thessalonians 4:13. Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind, who has no hope beyond breath, who has no hope beyond this life, who has no hope beyond this grief, beyond the grave. He says, we don't want you to grieve like those who have no hope. We don't want you to grieve like this secular culture you're in that doesn't believe in God, that doesn't believe in eternity, that doesn't believe that Jesus Christ came and died and proved eternity by raising from the dead. And if you want to follow them, great, but you are going to be hopeless and in despair. You have no relief for your pain, but we can grieve with hope. Jesus wept at Lazarus' tomb, his friend's tomb, after he died. Wept, even though he knew he was going to bring him back to life, because death is painful. Sickness and journeys and adventures and tragedies like this are painful. He hates it. He wept, but not without hope. And we need to be like him. Don't grieve without hope. And finally, always remember, tragedies aren't good. They're tragedies. They're horrific. They're unthinkable. They're incomprehensible. But God can and will work good even in the midst of and through tragedies if we let him. He did it through the great tragedy of Jesus' crucifixion. He's done it through all the great tragedies of all the persecutions against his people from before Jesus to after Jesus, and he's doing it today. So what's going on isn't good. What's going on isn't his plan. He didn't author these events, but he gave free choice, so bad choices like this could occur. But he also is able to redeem these moments. And he has also authored a way for us to experience eternal hope. So he can work good even in the midst of and through these tragedies if we let him. Let's let him, which then leads us back to what? Prayer. And we're going to end with prayer. But before we do, you guys have been talking, I know, and I've just been shepherding without connecting with you. So I would come over here now and just look at a couple of things you've said. Linda Pollock said, someone just recently pointed out to me that if we hate, we are no different than the pagans. Jesus didn't say to hate. He said to pray for our enemies. That's right, Linda. That's exactly right. Gail Neal said, he's God and I'm not. The most helpful thing I can do is put them in his hands. That's absolutely right. Sharon said, you're right. Lola said, pray, pray, pray. Thanks. Sharon said, amen, Pastor Brad. Thank you so much for this truth. It means so much. Yeah. At any rate, so I love that you're connecting, and I appreciate it. And, we need to be praying for the families in Uvalde and that have experienced all this loss. We have to experience for the first responders who had to go in and experience these horrific realities. They had to go in and they had to face it, and they're still facing it. We have to pray for those who are responding to the emotional health of the people involved and the mental health of the people involved and the physical support of those people and all these kids and the elementary school and this town and people, around who are just being overwhelmed by this. We need to pray. And that's what I'm doing. I hope you'll join me. All right, let's pray, and then I'll give you a few more thoughts, and we'll be on our way. Father, thanks so much for each one who's gathered. I pray that this time will be helpful. I thank you that you're the good shepherd, the great shepherd, the one we can turn to, the one that can internalize all pain and still function and help and support and encourage. You're the one who understands all things. Your thoughts are way beyond ours. You're the one who can give grace that's sufficient in any experience. You're the one who knows beginning from the end, so you know that, there's more to everything that we see and experience than we can see and experience. And God, we have to trust you in the end with that. You're God and we're not. You're God and we're not, as Gail said. But we do pray for grace to be poured out in the lives of all those involved in this tragedy who are suffering. I can't even comprehend it. I can't even comprehend it if it was my child. Can't comprehend it if it was my grandchild. I can't comprehend it. And you would be calling me to a very different experience if it was my child, my grandchild. You would be wanting me to focus on very different things. You would be wanting me to that. But you don't want all of us to respond as if it was our child or grandchild. You want us to empathize and care and pray. And so that's what we're doing. We're asking you to pour grace down in their lives. We're asking you to bring shepherds into their lives. We're asking you to bring the right people to help them emotionally and psychologically and physically and spiritually. Bring them into your life. I pray that in this horrific event, you would bring about good. You'd help wake people up to the reality of you. I pray that you would help bring solutions that address the complexity of the situation and include the realness of evil and aren't simpleton things. Help us to rise above our petty and hate divide. And God, I just pray that the Church of Jesus Christ in Uvalde and in Texas and around the world will help people to see you more clearly, even in circumstances like this. And I pray that Thursday Live has been somewhat helpful. Use it to help people, and I'll thank you for it. Be with each person who's now on Thursday Live or watching it now, and I just ask that you'd encourage them and strengthen them. Help Northridge to truly live up to what you want us to be, to wake the world up to Jesus. Help us to make this world a little less broken and a little less dark by waking people up to the light of Jesus, and we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, I hope that you have a great Memorial weekend and a great Memorial Day. To anyone who has lost a loved one because of their investment in defending for and fighting for our freedom. Thank you for the sacrifice you've made, and we pray for God's grace to be in your life. And if you're a part of Northridge or not, I hope that you would attend our services in person. That'd be great. Or online as we continue in our relationship series this weekend. And last but not least, I hope that I see you next week for Thursday Live. So I appreciate so much you joining with me. Thanks for praying for me. I'm praying for you. And let's be praying for all those who are suffering because of this horrific tragedy. Thanks, everybody.